Well, I just got back from seeing Inglourious Basterds, and gotta tell you, it's kind of a tough movie to review. And I really liked it, if that matters to you, but I actually don't think many of you will. And I know that sounds kind of snobbish, like I get it, you don't know. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this movie is actually very different than what was advertised in the trailers. I think most people are going to walk into Inglourious Basterds expecting kind of a super violent action, almost an action comedy, where Brad Pitt and this gang of criminals kind of bop around Nazi-occupied France and kill Nazis. And there is some of that, but actually, I would say there's very little violence to be found in this movie. What violence there is very graphic and very brutal and very effective when it does happen, but I don't think it's nearly as much as you might be expecting. You might be expecting like prolonged firefights, a lot of running gun battles and things like that, and you're not going to get that. In fact, most of the violence is very abbreviated in the sense that when the movie starts, most of the violence has already taken place. This is going to be spoilers, I know. I'm going to try not to give too much away, but when the movie starts, you get that whole "sound good" speech from Brad Pitt, and then immediately you cut to like a year afterward. The Bastards have already kind of had their reign of terror all across France, and you really don't see that much of it. You see one scene where it's kind of an aftermath. They've already wiped out most of the Nazis. You know, like you kind of see them dealing with the prisoners. So, and also in another sense, almost all of the movie, I'd say about 80% of it, is in spoken French and German with subtitles, English subtitles. And again, I don't really have a problem with that because I watch a lot of foreign movies just in the course of what I do. But most people, most American audiences might be turned off by that, just because if you're not ready for it, it's unexpected. And with a movie this long, it's over 2.5 hours long, if you're not ready for that, it may seem kind of boring, and again, it's not what you're expecting. It's a much slower, much more thoughtful, but also much more tense than you might expect movie. And that's why I say it may be you may feel kind of bait and switched when it comes to this film. Myself, I actually wasn't sure about this one when I walked out of the theater. I walked out very entertained, but not sure what I should really take away from it. Actually, I was kind of confused at first by the acting. Kind of seemed, or the characters, I guess, seemed a little uneven in terms like some are up here, some are down here, and it almost seemed like they were all very stereotyped and very almost caricatures or like cartoon characters almost. And then I realized that was kind of the point. Was you are watching, I hate to use the word considering it's Quentin Tarantino, but almost like a Pulp Fiction type novel where everything is supposed to be larger than life. Everything is supposed to be over the top. It's like kind of a comic book. In fact, I think that you might see very soon like a comic booky type fad when it comes to these World War II dramas. So yeah, but like I actually thought Brad Pitt was kind of indulging a little too much in his whole killing Nazis kind of really deep accent, to the point where it was kind of, you wonder if he was really that incapable of suppressing that accent, especially when he's in France masquerading as a civilian and things like that. Some of the characters are overly giggly and like seething evil. Like just forget about any kind of really deep characterization. There's only one character that really gets much of a backstory, and that's the woman Shoshana, who plays the Jewish woman seeking revenge. Beyond that, there's really nothing. And in fact, you see very little of the Bastards beyond their few acts of violence. They kind of appear at the beginning, they appear very briefly in the middle, and then they kind of do their thing at the end. And that seems like they're all through the movie, but it's, like I said, it's very, very brief. Most of the time, in fact, you're following the SS Colonel, or you're following the Jewish woman. So, again, I would say Brad Pitt is almost a supporting character, and yet he's given, like, top billing. Again, not what you might expect. But I really liked it because it was very tense, and the scenes of violence were very effective. I actually thought even if you thought it might have been a little slow, and I do think there was probably one too many scenes of people getting menaced across a table by a very smug and smarmy SS officer. There's several of those where they're kind of playing human chess, kind of being very subtle with their body language and their line of questioning, and how much does he know? How much does he know? Might have been one too many, especially around the second third of the movie where they're in a tavern and they're getting questioned by an SS operative. I thought that was a little slow, and I thought the kind of Mexican standoff that results was not as effective, and the conclusion of that was not as well shot as it probably could have been. But on the whole, I thought the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes are some of the most gripping and exciting movies I've seen all year. In fact, in quite a long time. I actually think this has been quite a good movie series, like the best of times and the worst of times. Again, Transformers too. But I think it's worth a watch. If this sounds at all appealing to you, just be ready for it not to be what was advertised in the trailer. But like I said, it is definitely a challenging watch, especially because it is so long and so different. But the good things, I thought, the acting, even though I thought it was a little strange at first, when I realized what he was trying to do, I thought it was top-notch all around. I think most people are going to walk away from this one recognizing the SS Colonel, I think his name is Hans Landa, as being one of a very classic-type villain. In fact, he really did a lot with that role. But I was also very impressed with other kind of more minor characters, like the Shoshana woman. I understand this is her first English-speaking language debut, which is actually kind of sketchy. That was kind of daring of QT to do that with someone who is not a native English speaker. In fact, has very little experience speaking English on film. I can't remember what movie it was, but I remember seeing another movie where it was an actress's first English-speaking debut, and I think it was also a French actress, and she was dreadful, like absolutely dreadful. She had no idea, like inflections, figures of speech, the kind of cadence that English speakers have, but she was very good, especially because she was expected to act in both French and English. And speaking of the actor who played Colonel Landa, this guy acts in 4 different languages, English, French, German, and Italian. That is fucking amazing how he is able to act convincingly in that many languages. And maybe that only impresses me because I'm American and Americans really only know one language, maybe 2 tops. I think European actors they grow up knowing at least 2, just because they live a lot closer to and it's kind of common courtesy when you live that close to people who speak other languages, especially like French, German, Italian. That kind of thing. But man, that knocked the socks off me. What else? Well, I won't go on too long, but I remember what I was going to say. I think, like I said, this was a hard one for me to review because I walked out thinking about it a lot, wondering, if the things I thought were a little confusing were somewhat intentional, and actually I think they were. Like I said, this was a very stylistic movie with a lot of strange but also very effective choices, especially when it comes to the kind of the one-note characters. And I might have changed a few things, but again, what I don't know is whether the changes I would have made would have improved it at all. For instance, I would have liked to have seen a lot more of the Basterds, like the various characters, like where they came from, who are they? Like, you only really get to know one of the Basterds, aside from Brad Pitt, and that's the Eli Roth character, and he says so little, he might as well say nothing at all. Like I said, their role was very abbreviated, and in fact, they're almost non-entities. In fact, I actually thought about if the movie might have been better having none of them at all, because I think really the primary storyline involves Shoshana, the Jewish woman, kind of undercover. I actually started thinking, like, maybe they didn't need to be in this movie, and it was good. Like I said, the conclusion would have not been nearly as good without them, but yeah, it was surprising to me how peripheral they were to the main storyline, especially considering the title. Also, there's a fair amount of irony here to be found, and I think there's going to be a lot of analysis of this film, and I'm going to probably turn this one over in my head quite a bit, just thinking about the stereotypical characters. It's not just the Germans who are stereotyped, although they are, in this movie, to a man, the most repulsive, repugnant, horrible, Jew-hating, murdering, sniveling, cowardly fuckers you'd ever see. Like everything. Like, you know the slimy guy in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Like, everyone is like that. Everyone. They're horrible. Like, you see scenes of Hitler and Goebbels, like, chuckling over scenes of allies getting shot in the face and, like, atrocities being committed. They're getting all giggly, and they love this shit. They love being mass murderers, you know. It was very over the top in that sense. But, at the same time, the British people are portrayed as being very snobbish. Like, they call them the Basterds. Things like that, you know, like, they're always drinking scotch. They're always very hoity-toity. The Americans, almost to a man, are either saddled with very thick Brooklyn accents or very thick Tennessee accents. You know, Brad Pitt is extremely over the top with his accent. The Eli Roth character has this enormous, I think, like, kind of Brooklynish accent. And so everyone there is kind of playing to type. Like I said, kind of like a comic book character. Almost like this entire movie is kind of a wish fulfillment fantasy. It's like almost like a propaganda film. In fact, I kind of wondered what it would have been like had you turned this movie over to who's the guy who did RoboCop? Why can't I think of his name? The same guy who did Starship Troopers. It's not coming to me, but I know his name. But that same guy who did the propaganda-type films like Starship Troopers, the same guy who kind of did a lot of satire of the media and like government propaganda. That same kind of thing is going on here. In fact, it's kind of ironic in the sense that you know, these American guys are repaying the Germans atrocity for atrocity, almost. Not in the sense that they're exterminating Jews and sense like that, but they are absolutely brutal, and like they're just wantonly murdering surrendered people and scalping them and doing like horrible things like beating them to death with baseball bats. And yet, at the same time, every one of these German bastards has it coming. So it's kind of ironic that, you know, we see Hitler kind of chuckling over soldiers getting shot in the face, and yet we get a good chuckle every time the bastards machine gun soldiers to death. And I don't know, like it was kind of funny how I thought maybe the movie was kind of turning that little eye for an eye thing around and just kind of making you think about it, or at least made me think about it. So yeah, like I said, there's quite a lot of irony to be found in this movie, and I think, despite the fact that you might see it as kind of being overly stylish, style over substance, almost cartoonish, and maybe a little stupid in a way, I actually think there is somewhat of a tongue-in-cheek smartness to it that's kind of laughing at the audience. I don't know, but like I said, it was very thought-provoking. In fact, another very thought-provoking movie this year. I'm very impressed with this film, and I'd like to see it again. But yeah, just to recap, you need to be ready for this movie. Just expect you're in it for over 2.5 hours, and be ready for a lot of foreign language acting. If that doesn't sound like it's your thing, if you're in there to see an English movie, you should probably avoid this one. If you hate Quentin Tarantino, don't come to me saying that you didn't like this movie because you hate everything Quentin Tarantino. Like, I hated Pulp Fiction, I hated Jackie Brown, that kind of thing. It's not going to make any converts, and if you liked QT, you're going to like this movie. But if you really liked Kill Bill and you walked into this movie expecting a lot more like over-the-top Kill Bill violence, you're not going to get that. But, again, I don't want to go over it again, but there were a lot of moments that were absolutely gripping to this movie, and I think you're probably going to see Oscar nods, especially to the guy who played Colonel Landa, because he really was one of the most iconic characters so far this year, and like I think I've heard him compared to Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men, one of those really classic villain turns that you're going to see. I think you're going to see it get recognized, and deservedly so. But, yeah, surprisingly good performances all around. And, to me, sounds good! Okay, yeah, go check it out. Have a good one.